and zero trust is a strategy, that it is journey management, and it is a way of thinking and an operating model that must be wrapped around these technical choices, these staffing choices, to have the right capabilities to manage these strategies, managing these native tools.
Welcome to SecuriTea Time, podcast curated for cybersecurity professionals and technology enthusiasts alike. I'm your host, Nicholas Moy. I lead partnerships for Scrut Automation. And today we have two guests joining us from Kalles Group, a leading cybersecurity consulting firm here in Seattle. I'm going to give some quick intros, Derek and Glen. So, hope that's okay.
That's great.
First, we have Derek here, Derek Kalles, founder of Kalles Group. Prior to establishing the company, Derek served as a business and technology consultant with Accenture, catering to the needs of enterprise companies. Combining his interests in security, IT, and professional services, Derek created Kalles Group to provide premier consulting services, securing the future for companies and communities. Derek serves as a strategic security and business advisor to clients across various industries. Besides his interest in technology, he has a deep obsession for Airstream travel trailers. Those are the Facebook ads, Airstream travel trailers.
Airstream travel trailers. And I was into Airstream travel trailers before the RV industry exploded and everybody wanted to be an RVer. So
now everyone is waiting for their Airstream.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone from Seattle to Portland.
Yeah.
And we also have Glen Willis here, a cybersecurity and privacy leader with 20 years of experience in the technology industry. Glen has worked across various domains, from data center operations to software delivery and strategic governance functions. He's passionate about helping organizations solve their most challenging issues and deliver on important strategic initiatives. Outside of work, Glen enjoys teaching and coaching basketball to inspire young people to grow through sports. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to the episode. And today's episode is going to be Securing the Future, Strategies to Master Cloud Security. We'll delve into the world of cloud security and explore strategies to help organizations master it. There's just so much to worry about when it comes to cloud security. It both feels like it's been around for a long time and hasn't, and it really just depends on who you're asking. Everyone's at a different place from using it. Our guests are going to share their insights and actionable advice. So get ready to learn some things and that are going to help you and your organization's journey to securing, your future cloud. So we'll get right into it, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
Okay. So first question, for you, Glen, start off, how has the cybersecurity landscape evolved in response to the widespread adoption of cloud? Both infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. What are some of the challenges you think we, us and our listeners need to be thinking about as they embrace the cloud, whether they're, maybe for early on, been doing it for a few years? There's got to be, what should we be worried about?
Yeah, so I think this is a journey that we're all on together in some ways, right? And when I think back to the first time my organizations were turning on cloud infrastructure and using it, it had this sort of brand around it that, hey, you just turn it on, it's secure, it works all the time, basically turn it on and go, right? And I think we've all learned that that's not exactly the case over the last whatever number of years we've all been doing this now, and that you have to bring your own security approach to whatever cloud platform you're using, whatever cloud services you're using. And so getting that alignment around the understanding that you still have to make a serious investment in the security aspects of your programs, your projects, your operations, all those sorts of things, and kind of knocking down that myth, if it's still out there, and I think it is to some degree. I still encounter it now and then, that we should have to do all those things because the cloud is secure on its own. And there's different manifestations of that. If you're talking about infrastructure as a service, it really is a lot on you in terms of what you deploy there. Are you deploying secure things to that infrastructure? From a SaaS standpoint, I think you still have to kind of treat SaaS as sort of a third-party risk. It kind of use traditional third-party risk assessment approaches around that. And the challenge there is how do you get the team that's been doing that for a long time, probably before the cloud existed, to know how to contextualize the cloud aspects of that. And then that's where the secure tooling is mostly there, usually there, it's expected to be there, but it still takes expertise in that native security tooling that comes with AWS or Azure or what have you. And so I think the biggest thing is just to create a real alignment, understanding that the cloud that doesn't really change the necessity for a serious security investments on your part, even if you're a consumer of the cloud. I think that's one of the biggest challenges to get right up front, or you're going to be kind of playing from behind the whole way.
Totally. No, so I think it's kind of like security is still important. Cloud services are great. Don't forget about them. And I think on that note, then, if we know it's like, hey, cloud is great in so many ways in terms of scalability, access, not having to make the capital investments for data centers. But we know that it's like nothing is perfect, and that there are other challenges too that come with that. And that it's not only we need to have security and it's still a necessity, but then, are there are probably unique challenges and vulnerabilities that maybe people aren't aware of. And so for cloud and making sure that your security posture there is going to be as good as it was wherever it was before, what are the strategies that people should be thinking about? Or, what would you want to make sure, that our folks kind of understand and know and can walk away with from today in terms of like mitigating and detecting security breaches and unauthorized access in the cloud? Are there any notches?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of it starts with understanding, first of all, the native tooling you get with whatever cloud service you're consuming. And it's a mixed bag, right? Some cloud providers are better in some areas of security tooling, some better in other areas. And so really making sure that you have your architects, really, not just engineers, but you have architects that are involved in helping you understand what the actual offerings are, what it can do, what it can't do. And from that standpoint, also staying on top of what non-native tooling is out there that is often better than the native tooling, unless you have deep expertise around, say, AWS to understand what Security Hub gives you, what GuardDuty gives you, on and on. But the non-native tools, they're operating that as a core competency, where the cloud native stuff is typically not fully centric on their roadmap development. They want to say they take it seriously and put a lot of investment in it, and that's true in a lot of cases. But it typically has limitations that some of the non-native tooling has. So knowing what your priorities are, what your real requirements are, and making sure you align kind of the tooling around that, and then backing that up with expertise and proficiency needed to fully realize the value of whatever tooling you have there. So much of it is really tooling and understanding what it can and can't do and what the right options are for you.
It makes total sense. I mean, I think, going into it, it's like there's so much that's available. There's all those different services. I couldn't list off all the many different AWS services and GCP services that are out there to help you secure cloud. But then there's everything else you're probably using, both the native and non-native. And I guess I'm sure there's a lot of pros and cons for people to think about when they're going, try to put together their roadmap. And, kind of like, as we get into, specific things that organizations, that we hear about, folks are trying to invest in to kind of really improve their security posture, reduce their risk, and mitigate threats to their environment in the cloud. Derek, I think it'd be interesting to get your thoughts, given all the different clients that Kalles Group works with, how organizations can leverage, what is zero trust? What does that mean for like folks going to cloud or in cloud now? How does that help? Is it, what does that look like? Yeah.
Well, I think the segue from, thinking about your cloud providers as very much like any other third party partner, right? Understanding that your operating model is now more borderless, right? We used to think about data centers. Now we're thinking about the capabilities and, crown jewel elements of organizations that are being put into in various forms, whether at the infrastructure, application, data layer, into cloud, is bringing together that conversation as an organization at a classic people, process, technology level. Whether we're talking about what native tools are available or what technologies you bring in to trying to connect, hybrid, multi-cloud environments, right? And looking for that that operational rigor that isn't just about security, right? It's about product development, right? It's about, the finance team, right? How many times have we heard customers talking about spend issues associated with their cloud, their cloud environments, right? And I think what I wanted to anchor on before even talking about zero trust is how you're seeing the operating model come together, right? And security, risk, and risk, product development, finance and operations, like recognizing cloud's not going anywhere, and we need to look at our operating model in a different way. And of course, we're going to advocate that there's always a security lens as part of that operating model. And I think that sets up that zero trust conversation. Zero trust is one of those concepts that it gets a little buzzwordy, right? And it's like, what does it mean? And you look one place and, a provider will say, this will solve it. This will get you to that oasis, and you can drink the water at zero trust. And it's not technically wrong per se, but it's a bigger conversation, which is it's not that oasis destination, it's a journey. And that oasis is probably the first one to the next one, to the next one. And that would be the first thing I would want people to hear is there's a lot of voices out there. There's a lot of great insights. There's a lot of interesting technologies and organizations, innovation going around this paradigm of zero trust. And, but at the end, it's a strategic imperative or an operating model of how to approach security and risk management that then, of course, starts to impact technical and process components, right? But I think one of the first things that's important if your organization is now, whether you're new or maturing around cloud, and then you're thinking about bringing more of a zero trust concept, or methodology into the organization, is, having your view of maturity. Like what does your network infrastructure device, your cloud presence look like, right? It's, very, very akin to going out and, buying something and not knowing what you even care about. Do you need a t-shirt or a sweatshirt? Well, it's going to vary. Are you going to the Caribbean or are you going to Antarctica, right? Now, you got to know what you have and what you think your needs are. And I think that's where then you can start looking at zero trust through a lens of, okay, how does this impact our people? How does this impact our product? How does this impact our customers? And then start getting into those where a lot of places want to go first, which is, let's start talking about, segmentation strategies and privileged access, and, how we can look at monitoring and analytics, and, we're going to go through the layers and, the layers of zero trust, and we're going to hit on it all, right? And it's going to be, it's just going to make everything easier. I don't believe zero trust is a premise that makes everything easier. I think it improves your security posture in a way that can be more dynamic and allow all organizations are constrained by capacity, dollars, both, right? To be able to have your highly sought after, highly capable security professionals focusing on the right things, right? Because they can't focus on it all. We used to build a big wall and we put a moat around it. Some of us even put a dragon out there to try to stop everyone from getting in. Dragon strategies maybe work in Game of Thrones. They don't work in the real world here. And I think that's what zero trust is about. So I'd want people to hear in both these moments of talking about really the big booming cloud and zero trust as a strategy, that it is journey management and it is a way of thinking and an operating model that must be wrapped around these technical choices, these staffing choices to have the right capabilities to manage these strategies, managing these native tool sets. I mean, Glen could have probably gone on for an hour talking about what it takes to bring rigor to activate these native tool sets, and then bringing technologies in that can help connect those dots and really make some of those certain laborious processes more efficient and seamless to a degree. So again, the really smart people on your security team can focus on the data with maturation, unfortunately incident-based or, leading indicators to stop the bad things, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's, especially at the point at the beginning where you're talking about before getting into zero trust, it sounds like there's an emerging kind of theme between what you and Glen are both sharing, is that companies need to kind of take a step back, sort of like, do you know what you have? You still need security. What does that mean for what you're doing now? Are you asking these questions? Are these the right tools for you? Is it the native? Is it the non-native tooling? What's most important to your company? What are you actually kind of worried about? And that this isn't even just a conversation to have in a silo with like, hey, us and the 5 security engineers, the CISO.
Right.
It's a conversation you have to have as a business, which can be hard, I imagine. Big companies can be hard places where it's like, how do we actually want to operate as a company with cloud as a core part of that? And then you layer on security teams that maybe they take a step back. They actually go figure out, like, what do we have? I think of an asset inventory as kind of like it's one of those no regret moves where it's like, hey, as a company, whether or not cloud or zero trust or any of these things are right for you, you do need to know what you have, and you have to find different ways to get there, and if you're in cloud, that adds one layer of both kind of ease and complication when it comes to, what resources your company is using versus a data center environment. But at the end of the day, I guess there's almost like it's starting to sound like there's a set of questions where if you're a company, you need to ask yourself these questions before you go pull the trigger and get trigger happy on purchasing many different things to make you feel better. It's almost like the Amazon shopping cart where you're just like, well, I heard zero trust, so I need one of those because I'm planning a zero trust party at the end of the month. So we got to buy one of those. It's like, oh no, I'm going to need chairs to go with that. And next thing you know, you've got enough for like a 4th of July picnic for 300 people. So,
right.
Totally. I mean, yeah.
But I think you hit on something there too of, the security team and the 5 engineers, right? Is when you're able to bring an organization together and go, experience matters, right? Whether we're in a product or service company, right? Experience matters, even when we're talking about risk, right? We have to decide how many locks are we going to put on the door, right? And sometimes it's too many for the experience, and then having risk at the table and having that risk-focused conversation, right? So that the organization is making those trade-offs. And then you have that security, pure security later going, okay, we go here. What does what does this do to our ongoing compliance workloads? What does this do for us operationally to adhere and continue to be best in class in the right places, right? And I think I wouldn't want people to take away from this that it's insurmountable. There's not first steps you can take, and whether that process I just walked through could be a hat worn by just two people, and it's having that purposeful intent. I think helps guide cloud, zero trust, connector technologies, and there's so much innovation out there, right? But gets the right dose of it for your organization, and that's what we just see a lot, Nick. Classically, is just organizations that have either overreached, underinvested, where they're kind of not getting it right for themselves. And then yes, look at industry, look at what competitors are doing, look at what tangential industries are doing great, best practice. But no classic order, and we can't be best of everything, right? We can't specialization. We cannot be best of breed in everything, right? And I think when you can bring that tenor, interesting things can happen between the product team and the finance team and the security team and the risk team, depending on how big your organization is. Suddenly there's some real trade-off conversations and alignment and walking these important scenarios out.
For sure.
Yeah, if I could jump in, we talked about not just the security team, not just security leadership making decisions, right? But I think sometimes we kind of leave behind the voices and the expertise that we could bring into decisions as well. So you want a holistic conversation there. I can't tell you how many times that if I get to spend enough time in an organization, you'll hear from a security team that's been in place for a while, maybe some third-party solution provider sold something to a business executive and a technology executive. You'll hear something like, this is dumb, or what we're doing over here doesn't make sense, right? And if you approach that maturely as a leader and you have the kind of a strong enough organizational culture, you'll not just say, hey, stop being like that, stop being so negative, get on board. Like for me, I want to sit down and say, okay, tell me why you think it's dumb. Like you have serious experience here to help us inform this decision. And sometimes the decision's already made, but it still is important for how we're going to implement, prioritize, et cetera. And I would bet, I've had the opportunity to lead some big organizations before. I would bet it's not as dumb as that person thinks, but I would bet there's some real valuable feedback in that perspective as well. And so making sure that you're bringing all that forward, I think sometimes cloud, zero trust, whatever, is kind of a shiny thing that leadership wants to kind of go after. They don't want to be the one, all my other peers, executives have this, I don't have this, I look silly, So, that's not the thing that we want to kind of operate from. So make sure that the expertise that you've developed over time and really invested in is brought in, their perspective is brought in. It doesn't mean their perspective trumps the decision or anything like that. But anytime you hear something like, or see an eye roll or something this is dumb or that doesn't make sense, there's something to go listen to there. And I think that's a critical part of this journey too.
No, that's super important. I totally appreciate you pointing that out, because I think it's like the eye rolls and this is so dumb, can't believe we're doing this comment. It's very real. I've heard all those and seen it all, but it's like there is something there, right? Because the people who are working on these problems every day, who are living it, and they are either in the security ops team, they're in the SOC, they're having to deal with this, they're on the red team, which are part of the security organization they're on. Their feedback is super important. I think making sure, it would be a real shame if you don't actually capture it and you just brush it off as like, hey, they're just Debbie Downers. And so, let's just forget about them and let's move on. I think would probably be the wrong thing. What was I thinking? Oh yeah, no, I believe the term is good idea fairy. When someone shows up to the team staff meeting one day and is like, hey, we just purchased a good idea. I just thought, we just read it somewhere. We should probably buy zero trust water and start drinking that, because it's from a zero trust oasis that Derek mentioned. It's out there. Everyone should go drink it. No, I mean, I think our people on the teams are I don't know, they're like the most important asset that we have, right? They're going to be the ones, whether you're using Kubernetes or whether you're on GCP, they're the ones who are going to be doing it, not the tool.
Well, and I think that's where that, I think there's a lot of really smart, loud voices out there on specific pieces of tech, right? But that security has been in this moment for, a while now, where culture and security meet, and security professionals being able to tell a data-driven story that can connect with other parts of the organization, right? And I think there's certain workloads that security deals with that really are their opportunity to connect with the organization, whether we're talking about experience and how, our, continuous deployment capabilities helps experience, and we can do that securely, or we're talking about, how incidents and those situations and insights in the data help guide those can be improved, or we're talking about compliance and those outside regulatory forces, and that we all, those are continuing to grow and they're getting more expansive, right? And, how the security team from an experience too can continue to advance against those and even maybe do better than what the requirements require, and engage the organization in a more efficient and effective way. And I think that's where connecting that your people are your most important thing, your important asset, right? And that data-driven story to help security in this new expansive operating model that, maybe less than just 15 years ago, it was, the security team's way over here, and they're just, they just tell us no, right? Customers want to see things secure. You've got forces that are not just the really smart, capable security professionals saying, this is important to me, right? This is going to drive my buying behavior. And as you could tell, my thesis is always try to connect it, even if it has some intellectual leaps, connect it to experience, connect it to customer outcome, connect it to trust, whether that's an internal view or an external view, and whether we're talking about making a process just better, then you build trust with your engineering team, your product engineering team. Great, right? Security wants to be on that plane at all times, right? And I think that's, it just drives better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, no, I think you said experience 100 times. So I
probably did. I hope we got a tally. I get a set of shake knives.
I think it's important. It's not just, because it's almost like, I know everyone's going to be at a different place in this. I know for me personally, one of the biggest learnings in my career was that security needs to figure out a lot of stuff, do the problem solving, has the experience, is in the trenches, doing this, but you can't get everything done by yourself. You're going to need the network engineering team, the DevOps team. Maybe there's 20 DevOps teams because each product team has their own DevOps team, and you're going to have to get that buy-in. You're going to have to work with other people. You're going to have to problem solve, because it's that experience that, you kept mentioning. I think, because it's an important point, sucks so much. No one's going to do anything. I mean, I think the reality is like, who's going to do anything if it's so hard and so complicated, so burdensome? And maybe the security team can enlist the help of these other folks who have expertise in areas that they don't, who have been there for a long time too, on, what are they doing and investing in the developer experience, right? I mean, the developer experience kind of space has so many products and so many tools to make it easier to write, test, ship, and push code. And, how all those things come together, it would be great. So it's not just like, oh, well, I always feel like it's too late when people are like, hey, this initiative the security team is working on, it's a great initiative. We all care about protecting the company, but it sucks. It's going to make it too hard. We'll never ship product fast enough.
Yeah.
So we'll do it next year. Thanks. And it's like, no one wants to be there. And hopefully we can help people avoid that. I know one topic that keeps people up at night potentially and makes people nervous, Glenn, I'd love to hear your thoughts on is like, when it comes to dealing with incident response and kind of like disaster recovery in the cloud, intuitively, a lot of people think like, hey, it's easier to do backups, should be easier to do disaster recovery. How are we going to, it's like, what's the fallout look like? Or how do we prepare for incident response in the cloud? Is it the same? Is it different?
Yeah, it's a great question and an important question. The principles are the same, right? I think the planning still has to be done. You can't plan for everything, so you have to do good prioritization there, right? And then the principle that if you haven't tested it, you don't know that it works, right? And for sure, backups, in a sense, are easier in the cloud, depending upon what you're running there. Whether what you're running there is connected to a lot of legacy stuff that you still have, right? It so depends on your kind of technology makeup and all that sort of stuff. And then failover, right? I mean, we all, kind of thought up front in this cloud journey that would be like, I push one button and I fell over from region to region or whatever it is to kind of make that work. And that's just not always true, because the things that you've deployed to the cloud, how resilient are those things? How gracefully do those things handle that capability for the cloud platform to kind of move you to a different region or whatever that is? So the principles are exactly the same. They're unchanged. You need to work through, our top 5 to 7 most likely incidents that we're going to encounter based upon business profile, tech profile, et cetera. Build a playbook around those. Do exercises, practice them, right? Take the learnings from those exercises, bake them back in. And on top of that, right, make sure you really understand what the cloud platform can do and can't do, what it does automatically, what is incumbent upon you to make sure that you have your technology that's deployed there able to gracefully handle those kinds of failover events and recovery events and those things. So again, it's like, where does their capability begin and end? And then where does the sort of the features of what you're running there begin and end as well? And think of that as a collective whole. Test it, right? I don't know how many organizations I imagine, we see a lot, I imagine Derek's seen it too, that, this year we're going to do 3, DR or BCP exercises or failover recovery exercises. You get to August and you haven't done one of them, right? Because growth work always kind of kicks it out, pushes it out. And it's hard. I don't want to say that as if, it should be. No, it's hard. Those are hard conversations around prioritization, making time for that. But it really is critical to kind of build that into your plan for a year and to hold yourself accountable and have a team of executives or team of leaders and team members holding themselves accountable to, like, we said we were going to do this. We said this was important. We haven't started this yet. We'll be at 5 months left. We were going to do 3. How are we going to handle this? And so that stuff just, the principles are the same. The technology considerations, the technology implications are a little different. You need to understand them. But it still goes back, if you don't have the principles right, almost nothing else matters. And maybe nothing else matters at all. We can argue over whether it matters a little or not, but the principles are the same and they're all critical to get right.
Yeah, when I'm in a room with executives, whether it's large or small company, it really is anchoring to that resilience, right? How resilient does your organization need to be if an incident happens, if a disaster happens, if there's continuity problems because of a provider, right? I think when you get the conversation at that level and then you start asking questions, did you do fire drills when you were in elementary school, right? Yep, I did, right? You ever done drills? Are you ever in a sport where you practice safety and then that moment actually comes and you were so thankful you did it, whether it's hiking, scuba diving, pick, whatever it is, right?
The elementary scuba diving team?
Well, that might be a little out there, but I think when you anchor it to that, again, you can make a very big concept more into some, what are some best next actions, right? Hey, what keeps you up at night the most? Let's start there. Like, to Glen's point, let's prioritize, right? Is there, have you done an assessment recently to understand where your biggest weaknesses are. Have you had any experiences in the last couple of years that we can trade on, like kind of looking for that prioritization? I think that's where you can anchor around resilience, because it's like you want your car to be resilient, not break down all the time, right? Like you know, that starts going to competence and trust and all the things that, again, go back to experience there. See, I get another participation trophy for that, right? Then I think you can get into, okay, you know, do I need to do an assessment? Have I built any type of plan? Do I have any type of playbook? Have I ever practiced it? Have I talked to my partners to see how they can help and be a part of this? What natively comes from my cloud providers or my security tool capabilities, right? And I think you start, especially in small to medium-sized organizations, which, I mean, frankly, just anything non-enterprise, I think you start seeing executives, you lift up those rocks a little bit and they can get a little more encouraged around, okay, we do have capabilities. We just need to bring it together and we need to make that commitment. That resiliency matters for our customers. It matters for our team, and let's prioritize it. And then, yes, we're going to practice that fire drill.
Yeah. And I think, I appreciate that. And to Glen's point, then to prioritize it, companies will need to know what those principles are. They will need to kind of go back to, like, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to prepare for? And if it's sort of like, if you never did anything before and you weren't making any investments in security, or you just were making very few investments, it's just as important now. It's still very important to actually be clear as a company. It's like, what is important to you? What is that prioritization? And how are they going to prioritize? I think I hear a lot where it's like, hey, people need to go prioritize. And it having been a core part of, I worked for a lot of years in previous roles was, well, it turns out there are a lot of ways to prioritize security investments. Is it actually, hopefully, in theory, it's around what your company's top risks are that are relevant to the business. Going back to, Derek, your point on, like, we doing it in a vacuum, or is this actually with finance, with the product teams, with everybody else in terms of what's important for the company? What are we trying to protect? But then also, what does that mean for our operations? Are we even, how are we actually going to do it? And easier said than done. August is coming up, and hopefully, it actually is coming up. And it's like, people are like, well, I guess I'm going to have to do those 4 quarterly BCDR tests in September. I'll just do all 4 of them, 1 per week. And it's the same, right? And I think on the note of doing BCDR tests, and I think this is a big topic, is there's so many regulations. There's so many regulatory frameworks, industry standards, and kind of quasi-regulations. If regulations, if we mean to be like government specific, we have the kind of tried and trues, like we have PCI DSS, we've had HIPAA for a long time. There's high tech, and GDPR, ever since its introduction, has definitely shaken up like every business that touches PII, whether directly or indirectly for their customers who are B2C companies. Where do we start? Where do people start? What are some important things that they keep track of? Because a lot of BCDR exercises, I would venture to guess that companies are doing maybe for a specific regulatory requirement. They're probably doing some of those things. Those fire drills are probably being done for a regulatory requirement, right?
Well, and even just having a framework, like simple, I think you're absolutely right. When you're making those prioritization choices, whether it's in the entire envelope of security or it's, business continuity and resilience, right? Is, revenue, people, customer, regulatory. Right? If I had to pick my very simple lanes, right, of because that regulatory piece is something that it's, the expansiveness and depth only continues to grow. And Glenn, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts here. I think what I would anchor people to is that, it's a force that is only growing, like you said, GDPR and its influence, in many states starting to, obviously California and others authoring their own standards, it's compliance and privacy. And I think I like to, again, always anchor back to that impact to your customer. Customers are demanding privacy more and more, and protections, right? And that's where, in theory, the root of these regulatory agencies coming from, right, is to protect an individual, protect a group, protect, some body of people, right? And I think as leaders, the good news is it's not insurmountable. There is incredible innovation happening, help streamline these processes and what's necessary. And there are, some first steps you can take to really find that, pragmatic position for yourself. And you might be going, wait, there's discretion as it, comes to dealing with regulatory organizations. And, the answer is yes. And, there's a lot that goes into that. And I think, I don't know, Glenn, if you want to hit on a few things of just like good first steps we see organizations say, but I'd be amiss if I didn't say the word that I'm always imparting on our organization, wanting our customers to hear is, even when you're dealing with a third-party agency, is bringing a level of pragmatism into the room on your organization, what you have, what your capabilities are, and how you're aligning with those over time before we start talking about, unified compliance and risk frameworks and trying, start getting into, more and more advanced processes and technologies, right? It's just, let's start from where you're at. So Glenn, I know you're probably just hopping to jump in here.
Yeah. From my experience, like, leading, large kind of security operations and programs, trying to get the business to prioritize things like, testing, your recovery capabilities and all that sort of stuff. For me, like I learned early on, if I have a risk register that's kind of anchoring our decision points, right, and I'm putting 800, like an Excel spreadsheet with like 800 risks in front of my business partners, and no, that's not going to get you where you need to be. You want to really kind of have in a single time, like maybe 12, and have those top risks that really need executive attention, funding decisions to be well understood risks. And when you can map, the possibility of having downtime that you really don't know if you could handle, RTO targets, RPO targets, you don't really know if you could hit, right? And those are tied to a short list of risks that are really the focus of that conversation. I found that I can get a lot more progress, kind of really bringing that focus down to that, right? And so that's really critical. When it comes to regulations, like Derek was mentioning, there are a lot of gotchas. Like, I think some people assume, like, if there's a regulation that requires you to have your secondary site be X number of miles from your primary site, oh, I'm in the cloud, I automatically get that. No, you don't make that assumption, right? You need to really find out if that's what you have for your commercial contract or whatever the mechanism to kind of get that there. So there's a lot of things to kind of just don't assume that's there. Don't assume it's any different than when you're running everything in your on-prem data center. It's kind of vet that out. So for me, it's like really focus on your top risks. Doesn't mean that you don't have your team focusing on a longer set of risks, but when you're trying to really mobilize funding and executive prioritization, is really keep that list really, really small. But when it comes to like vetting out like all of these regulatory things, that's where you want your team, to really challenge assumptions and make sure we really know kind of what we get, we don't get through the service contract that we have with whatever cloud provider you're doing business with.
Yeah. And I think the point you guys are making is also it's kind of like, it's consistent throughout, where it's like, if you don't know what your top risks are, you don't know what you're prioritizing, you don't know what you're worried about, there's too many different things you could go do. But I would hate to be the person putting together the 800 row risk register. Not really. Seems like an inventory of every possible thing in the world at that point.
Yep.
That's a terrible. Yeah, I mean, I think risk registers, I obviously have a soft spot in my heart for that. It's kind of where I spent a lot of my early days in cybersecurity working. That, yeah, they can be useful prioritization. It's a useful prioritization process, at least within the security space, to just say, whether we're talking about how much vulnerability management to do, how much to, what we should do for these regulatory requirements, and how are we going to do them? Because I think it's like you said, a lot of regulatory requirements, Derek, to your point, the discretion comes in. They don't actually tell you how to do it in your environment with your technology for your product with your people. They tell you have to protect, or you have to do XYZ with PII data. You have to track who has access and whatnot. But they don't say, well, for your application, you can go do it at this service and you can go log it here and it's all done. You have to go figure that out, and you as a team will have to go figure that out. It's going to take time, and that's going to compete with those growth priorities in the sprint. And the dev team's going to have a sprint loaded up with everything from the product team. Is going to have a host of roadmap items coming down, from the top, where it's like, hey, our go-to-market requires us to be here by this point, and these regulatory requirements and our risk, if we just never talk about it, it's going to be something that's just too easy to kick the can down the road, I think. I mean, it's super important. It's sort of like for all of this, we could say, to get that, you had said it earlier, where it's like on dosing. It's like security dosing. You have too much, too little, you have none. You don't have the right one. You really have to, that's like that prioritization. You have to know your business. You have to actually talk to, listen, and get insights and expertise from the other folks in the company. These were points that both of you have made. And I guess it's like when you're coming up against any of these challenges, adopting cloud services and whatnot, it is both like you can be pragmatic. It's not insurmountable, so it's not hopeless, but you do just need to like, hey, no, what are you as a business? And maybe it's not even you, right? You can't answer that question. Where are you going to go? Who do you need to go talk to understand what is the most important thing to your business? Now you can make good recommendations that are in the context of the constraints that you have. I mean, these are all things, I wish someone would have told me like 10, 15 years ago, where it's just like, hey, it turns out like, don't overthink the specific threat or technology or thing, because that stuff just kind of comes and goes. Like, it will. It'll come, or maybe it never goes, but then we just have more stuff come. It's like, what are we going to do about containers? What are we going to do about Kubernetes? What are we going to do about cloud instances? Everyone was super worried about that. Well, we always had to do. We actually just had to figure out like what makes sense. I mean, what are some things that you all see or hear from your clients, or past and present, that you think are relevant? So like that pragmatism. What have you seen maybe were challenges, things didn't work well, or if you could share something.
So it's interesting because if someone said, Glenn, give me like two like really practical, like actionable things. We've been talking about strategy and the so critical, culture, and getting the right people and the right decisions and stuff. But like if there's a practitioner listening, like two things. Number one is, when you think about what you want to exercise, test, don't just think about incident scenarios where an attacker is trying to do A, B, or C, right? What I've learned along with clients and in my own kind of time leading security programs is test your ability to do something like respond to a 0-day exploit, right? We don't think of that as an incident, right? But it is such a critical kind of response capability you need to have in your organization. And then the cloud makes it in some ways harder because our assets in the cloud are more ephemeral, right? Ephemeral, right? And that makes it a serious moving target. How quickly can you identify where this vulnerability exists, like right now? That I practice that stuff, right? That stuff is critical to kind of get right. It's really hard to go identify kind of where the dependencies are, all that sort of stuff. So don't just think about this kind of reacting to an event, right? Prepare for that kind of scenario as well. That's very much worth practicing and exercising and testing your own capability to respond to that. The second pragmatic thing is, right, the cloud is supposed to allow project teams to spin up faster, get working faster, deploy compute resources that they need, right? At what point in a project's lifecycle does a security function start to gate what those assets have and don't have, right? Is it when it hits QA? Is it, what is that, right? Because you don't want to say on day one, you have to do these, 47 things, right? That's not going to be helpful from a velocity standpoint, getting the project going. But at the same time, if you wait until too late, then you're just adding a bunch of rework, and that's never going to be accommodated if we're being real about it, right? So if you have to, like, the last 3, 4, or 5 years, kind of one of the things I've learned is really, really exercise your ability to respond to a 0-day exploit. That's hard to do. And if you don't practice it and kind of look into that, you're going to struggle to do that. The other thing is, you want project teams to self-resource and to kind of have a self-service kind of approach. But you have to think about how you're going to engage them to kind of get them on track to hitting security requirements for that project. If I were brand new at this and like trying to tackle like in the cloud, like the two things that I seek out over and over and over, these are the two things that I often see. Yeah, security tools, we talked about that. But in terms of real world things, these are the things that are gotchas that come up over and over and over. So I would throw that out there.
The one I would add to that is, if we're talking in the realms of regulatory compliance, privacy, and I'm looking at, leaders in those spaces, it's not just tending to the outcome of achieving what XYZ says we need to do, but tending to the process, tending to the continued maturation of the process within the organization that's working with your stakeholders, actually looking for investment in automations, like tending to the process. And I think that connects with Glen's second point around being purposeful around where does it need to gate, or whether we're talking more of an evidence-based process, or it's tending to the process and finding that right dose, the right path of maturing it, right? Everyone loves to use the big word automation. Okay, well, that takes investment. So like having that journey management. So I think that's a theme I keep hearing is organizations getting more purposeful around process management, journey management as it relates to people process and the classic people process and tackle. Like it's important for how they're engaging so that they can actually be successful across your organization. Again, not be shut out, that's the alternative, right? You're shut out. You don't hear about it until it's, we're deploying tomorrow. Can your team deal with it tonight? Or, this just happened. Well, we go fix it. That's your, the next point out. And hopefully people are smiling a little, chuckling when they hear that, because we've all experienced that. We all know it happens. And I just think that when security leaders tend to the process and the journey, they just get better results, even if it means sometimes they have to slow down a little bit and bring people along and educate and put up some gates in the right spots, right?
No, I mean, and it's, in case, I would be remiss if it goes without saying, and that is hard. Getting people together to go through the process is not nearly as easy as updating packages and pushing out, new things, automation. But actually getting people together, I think that's a huge thing. And then I think on Glen's point, it's like, if I can remember some of the most difficult days in my career are when those 0 days drop, whether it's Heartbleed, Bash, shell shock. That was not fun. Fortunately, wasn't there for Log4j. I didn't hear good things about that, and it's just like, that is very real. Like, if you're not practicing that, you'll get value out of that, because that's going to happen before the super complicated, ultra crazy James Bond style story your incident response exercise facilitator came up with that sounds really cool, where it's like, oh, and then this happens and then the president calls you. Instead, it's going to be like, no, what's more likely to happen is Elasticsearch or somebody else. I mean, not just, I don't know, Elasticsearch just came to mind because that's how ubiquitous they are, but some super popular package or product, you're going to get an update and it's going to be like, hey, this has 4 vulnerabilities and it actively exploited. It's everyone's using it on public facing boxes, instances, edge workers, and Cloudflare, what have you. And it's vulnerable. So everybody's got to go patch it. Everyone's got to go find it. They got to go look for it in their WAFs. They got to go look for it everywhere on their network devices. And even if you're in cloud, you're going to have to go look for it in your cloud logs. You're going to have to go look for it everywhere. That's those are the, all hands on deck, 24/7, around the clock.
And I think, as a, as a service provider, customers want to hear what's new, what's exciting, what's the biggest, kind of the bright, shiny object, whether it's on the productivity side or it's on the, vulnerability side, right? But to your point, when you step away from the, Jack Bauer moment or James Bond, pick your flavor, one of the sadder and harder things that we see, it's just where those failures have happened, whether it's 0-day, whether it, it's some other type of incident, or it's, a continuity and resiliency issue, and it was just the basics weren't being done. And, anchoring leadership back to the basics really are the foundation and can get you a long ways on improving your security posture and understanding the operational flows of your security engine to improve that security posture, and tending to that and getting that dialed the right degree of maturity, so that you can focus on some of these other areas that maybe are a little more exciting or shiny, or really have the potential of really advancing your security posture. Great. But I'd be amiss if I didn't say a lot of the failures we see are the basics, and that's where you got to get everybody in a room, and you got to get people anchored to, not the Casino Royale use case, right? Let's get into the, let's get to the basic response playbook. Like, let's get to the basic operational compliance elements that need to be tended to, right? And making sure our people understand how security impacts our customers.
No. So, I mean, and I think on that note, it's like, to wrap it up here, it's like, hey, we've heard, and I think we learned today, it's like, it's not there's the shiny objects, the zero trust oasis, and water that will protect you. There's
those dragons. Don't forget those dragons.
The dragons that are going to protect your defense in depth mode. But really, at the end of the day, it's like pragmatism, consistency. These are the things that are going to actually, like, what you actually go do, and you do on a regular basis, and that process and getting people together. Those are the good things that are going to do more good for you when the next Log4j, I think Move It was the recent one. Vulnerability is going to come out, and I think it's like the consistency is important. Probably underrated because it doesn't fit into like a Gartner acronym. There's no Gartner acronym for being consistent and pragmatic in your security program. But no. So thank you both. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Derek, for joining us today, and thanks for taking the time. So
thank you.
Looking forward to learning more future conversations. Really, really appreciate it and enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave.